only be a member of our group. We've got members that are members of the BFRO, GCBRO, Sisters of the Moon, Beast. You know, we have a lot of members that do have multiple memberships. Now the Sisters of the Moon, we spent quite a bit of time out there with them. They've had some really wild things happen to them, and they've also had situations where, you know, they've been left in the field by other groups on their own. Debbie knows exactly that situation. So, but without further ado, I'm gonna bring the ladies up and let them. I think they've got a video, and we also got your audio on the computer already. So I'll let Debbie introduce everybody.
Thank you. Hey y'all, good morning. Everybody survived the storms last night. It was crazy here. We were in a tent, but it's fun. This is Barbara Locke.
Hello.
And her sister Sandy Hoyle. They're legitimately sisters, but we're all sisters by heart. We have two other members that aren't here. One of them could not get off work today, and she's just sick that she couldn't make it. That's Patty Ogden. And then Henry Edge, and that's a female. She should be here, so we're a little worried that she's not here, but we'll just go on, keep on trucking. And what we want to share with y'all is one of our really big incidents that we had happen to us. Myself and one other lady were camping. We name our places so we don't have to say the locations and everything, and we call this area Tribulation Bay. There was a lake on one side of it, and Henry had gone out scouting for locations because we had previously been out there, and it was a good area. We had found two uprooted trees. They were about 40 to 50 feet tall. Mark, wouldn't you say that's about how long those uprooted trees were? Yeah. We carried Mark and one of his research partners out there, and they saw the area. They had been uprooted. There were no holes anywhere where these trees had come from. And both of the trees had been stuck up into a Y of a really huge tree. They were propped up. I have photos on my phone that I can show you. We just couldn't get them to transfer here to go onto the screen, unfortunately. But the roots, they weren't like the roots you see, you know, they had the little spindly ones. These were hard, pointy roots. And, you know, just hard. And they had been propped and then shoved down on one side in the ground. And where those trees were, we had gone into that area because Henry and I had walked up to the edge of a creek, and as far as we could see back, there were tree breaks. And the breaks were all relatively right at the same height and all broken, pointing down in the same direction. So we decided we had to go in there and follow those tree breaks and see where they led to. And the further back we got, we'd look off and there'd be something else, and we kept going. There was an asterisk, you know, that had been made in between one tree, and you know what an asterisk is, you know, the really pretty little symbol. It was huge. It stood up probably about this high, and it was as wide from here to the other side of Sandy, actually. It was a big asterisk. And, oh, there's a picture of it on the video that he's going to play here in a minute. And the trees, are the trees on there? No, I don't. Okay. There were bows, beautiful bows that they had to have hands to do it because they were woven. Some of the Ys, you know, a branch will come out and make a Y. They had taken, whatever did this, would take this side of the Y and had pulled it over to this side of the tree. And then taken this Y and pulled it over to this side. And then once it went over and back down, the next one that came up was done the same way. And so they were manipulated, so to speak. And I'm too close to the speaker. Anyway, lots of things in this area that made us want to come back out there and find a good location to camp and spend a weekend just by ourselves. And so we did. And we were waiting for Henry to show up. Henry always comes about in the middle of the night. We never know when to expect her. So at the time we were there. It was me and another girl, Carrie, and we were setting up the tent. It was still relatively daylight. It hadn't gotten dark yet. And while we were setting up the tent, we started hearing moans in the wood line that was just right there beside us. And we'd never heard moans before, you know, and that was new and unusual to us, and it was a little creepy too. And every few minutes, we'd hear a moan. Then it got to be, we just continued on putting up the tent. We try not to react to the things we hear, even though that was pretty interesting. We did look over there to see, you know, okay, we don't see anything, so there's something weird going on. The longer it did it, and the less we reacted, it continued on and was picking up pace. So these moans started changing into animal sounds. It would start off as a moan, and then it would turn into a cow. And then a little while later, it would start off as a moan and turn into like a chicken. We had one turn into a whimpering dog. And some of them were pretty good. I mean, very, you know, we're like, okay, I know there's not a cow out there. The one that really got me is it turned into a bear, what sounded like a bear. And it was a serious growl, moan, roar kind of thing. And that freaked me out a little bit. And I told Carrie, I was like, okay, if that is a bear, because there are bears where we were, and I said, I really don't want to be here without bear spray. So I said, let's run into town, which was 40 minutes away. We were 40 minutes from the closest town that had a Walmart. And I said, let's see if we get some bear spray. And so we left. I turned the recorder on before we left, because I didn't have it on while we were setting up the tent. I mean, we'd gotten there, trying to put up the tent before it got dark. So we just started setting it up. So I turned the recorder on before we left it running. Took us about 2 hours. Go to town, come back, shop and all that. Didn't have any bear spray. And as soon as we got back, our tent was completed, of course, so we went ahead, got our chairs and sat down by the campfire, had our recorders, and had our gun in the cup holder. And it was almost instantaneous. Once we got back, we heard the most perfect whoop. But before we heard this whoop, it sounded, this was really strange. We had a lot of strange things happen that night. It sounded almost like an electric saw. It was really weird. And we were even talking about, is that an electric saw? And when we listened to the audio back, it sounds like a really high-pitched scream on the audio, and it goes into the whoop. And while we were listening to it, it sounded differently to us, because we thought it was a saw sounding, but it was loud and it was coming from the wood line again, and we knew that there was no electricity out there for one thing. But anyway, it was the saw and the whoop, and then directly behind us over our left shoulder, the exact same sound. Coming from two different locations, but it was exactly the same. And DW, I think you have audio of that. Do you have it on there? It starts like, it says screams, I think. Yeah, that's it. He's going to play it for you real quick. That's me talking. I said, oh my God, I can't freaking believe this. I was excited. I mean, this was really an awesome night, and a lot of people have asked me, how in the world did y'all stay there? Because we had a heck of a lot of activity. I think it was such a rush. You know, that's what we're there for. We're there to hear and learn and listen and try to find out more things about this creature that we're all so interested in. And this was an opportunity, what was happening that night, that I never dreamed would happen. The screams, the whoops, the howls, the moans, the changing into animals, it was all combined into this one night. So it was freaking awesome. And I was really having an adrenaline rush. We continued on while we were sitting there at camp. There were howls, whoops, screams. We continued hearing moans, but the moans began turning more into growls, low growls, all night long while we were sitting outside. We have another one on there that says Good House. I'm so creative with my titles.
Can you hear that?
Okay, and we've cut them into little snippets because we had, from the time we turned the recorder on until the next morning, it was like 13 hours, I think. So we set out, we recorded all night while we were out there, and then finally we decided we was going to go to bed. And we go into the tent. It was Carrie's tent, and you can stand up in it. It's real big. It even has a little closet that comes off the back. It kind of juts out from the back and has flaps on the inside. So we use that as our potty area. And so we had a little potty sitting in there.
And don't forget a jacuzzi.
Hey, you know. She had her cot on this end, facing the wood line, and my cot was long ways in the front. There was a window right in front of my cot, and then the door was in between both of us, and I'm telling you this for a reason. Before we went to bed, I normally go out and I'll put my recorders, I'll zip time into trees out in the woods, but I wasn't going out there this night. You know, and it all started before we were ready to get anything going. They were ready, but we weren't. So I said, I'm not going out there, I'm not putting my recorders out there tonight, but I'm going to put one on each side of the tent. And so I did. I had two recorders, a silver one and a black one. And so I just set them down on this. Now, this was mid-September when this happened. So everything was still green, plush. It was still pretty hot, but there was a pile of grass on her side. I set it, just laid it on top of it, and then there were two trees with big trunks that came up next to mine, and I set them in the Y of those two trees. So we had one on each side of our tent. And my window faced out, I could see the campfire, and I could see our vehicles that were further on out there. And we had driven in, but they were parked out that way. And they were facing the wood line where all this activity was coming from. So we get in bed, Carrie lays down on her cot. I'm messing with mine. I'm not used to sleeping on cots, and it was her cot. So I was trying to get it, you know, comfy, and we had a blow-up mattress on top of that, and I didn't want it to make any noise, so I'm messing with that. And while I'm standing there, I hear, to me it sounded like a cough. I thought it was Henry. So I looked at Carrie and I said, Henry's here. And I unzipped the window and I looked out. Henry wasn't there. And so I zipped it back up and I looked back at Carrie and I said, she's not out there. About that time there was another cough, but it was coming from over here now. So I unzip it and I look out and I get my spotlight and I'm shining it and I holler, Henry, Henry Edge. Of course I was a lot louder. Nothing. There was nothing out there and I'm shining it, don't see anything, zip it back up. So now I go to the middle of the tent, closer to Carrie, and I said, Carrie, those were human coughs. I mean, they sounded so human. And it threw me off. I'm used to moans now and growls and roars and screams and howls, but I'm not used to coughs. And so I'm beginning to think some redneck bubbas have followed us in here, and we got them out here, you know, two women, which a lot of people think we're crazy for doing that too, an all-female research group, but we do have weapons. So I'm telling her, I'm like, did you hear them? And she's like, no. And she goes, I'm laying on my good ear. And I'm like, what? You have a bad ear? I didn't even know that. So she sits up, and the third time it came from the back corner. And she had heard that. And so we're like, okay. And so anyway, she sits up on her cot, and it's basically, we've heard a total of 8 coughs. It had gone all the way around the tent. So by the time she had set up, one was back here on her side of the tent and had actually pushed in, and her cot moved a little bit. So she gets up and she gets in the middle with me. I'm standing up. We still had our little nightlight thing on that, where you can see inside the tent. We hadn't turned it off yet, so it was still on. And we're standing there, and it's completely come around our tent, coughed 8 times, and I'm asking her, do you think it's humans? And she said if it is, they walked a long way in. Because there was no other vehicles out there. We certainly didn't hear any vehicles. And we were a long ways from some houses. I think it was approximately 4 miles to the closest house. And so we're thinking, okay, there's a possibility, considering what we've heard, that it is Bigfoot or something that we think is Bigfoot. And there's a possibility that it's humans. And I was more bothered by the possibility that it was humans than I was that it was Bigfoot. I know that sounds crazy, but...
No, it don't.
All right, so I told her, I was like, I gotta know if this is human. So I said, let's get our key fobs, and we'll stand in the door. We'll wait till we hear something, because we could hear twigs breaking, we could hear movement. We, other than the coughs, we knew something was out there anyway. So we stood in the doorway. I said, let's wait until we hear movement, and let's zap our cars, let them light up the lights, and we'll go out at the same time, and maybe we'll see something, catch something. Now, I don't know what we were going to do if we did, but hey, it was the start of a plan at least. And so that's what we did. We stood there at the door, and we waited. And sure enough, as soon as we heard something, we barreled out of that door. She had one of them swinging doors, it's on a little hinge. Those are awesome, by the way. And we came out, we had our guns. I mean, we seriously did look like Charlie's Angels. We came out, like they do. And absolutely nothing out there. Couldn't see anything. Our lights were on, it was lit up. Didn't see anything. We thought, if something was out there, I don't think a human could have gotten out of sight that fast. But we didn't see anything. So we walked around everywhere. We didn't go out into the wood line, but we did walk around the camp and look, and then went back in the tent. So we're back in the tent, and it'd been quiet now for probably 10 minutes or so, and we're like, okay. So we sit down on our cots. She lays down, and I'm sitting there listening, and then we start hearing, more noises. And this was kind of the pattern throughout the night. Every time it would get quiet is when they'd start up again. And if they could hear us talking, they were like, oh yeah, they're in there, they're probably scared and all that. And so they were constantly making noises. And then if we got quiet, then it'd be about 10 minutes later and they'd start up again. We ended up going outside for a second time because it had gotten just so active. I'm like, okay, we gotta see if we can catch them. And we went out the second time, same effect. Nothing was out there. Nothing at all. Couldn't see anything. It was dead quiet, so we go back in. In the process of that night, at one point, we were sitting on the floor in the middle of the tent. And it had come up, something had come up to the tent and was dragging either its fingers or a tree branch or something along the tent. And it started in the back corner and was coming all the way down. And when it got to that little potty area, and this was pretty early on in the night, it was hesitating around that potty area. And so we were sitting on the floor, Indian style, and we were looking over our shoulders because it was messing up high around the potty area. And so while we're looking up there, something in this corner, this is when we found out, okay, there's two, hit the corner of the tent where my cot was. And it was loud. And of course, now I've got all of this on audio, thank goodness. I was so excited about that. It hits the tent, we jump, look, and the whole side of the tent is just going up in a wave, And so we're like, okay, we're dealing with at least two somethings out there. And it just proceeded on different things. We sat there in the middle of the tent. Sometimes we'd get up, we'd go, stand up or sit down on the cot, and we'd end up back in the middle of the tent. We were hearing the moans still. And the second time we were in the middle of the tent on the ground, and we had heard something to our right, so we were looking in that direction, and it hits the tent again. And it came in at probably that far, and it was hitting down low. If it had come much further, it would have hit the legs of my cot. So it was hitting hard. And the whole side of that tent was in a wave again. All night long, this kept on, back and forth, back and forth. We get in the bed, you get out of the bed, in the bed, out of the bed. And it's not like we were going to go to sleep, but we had a huge root that was in the middle of our tent, and that's where we were having to sit, you know, when we were there. And it was just uncomfortable to stay down there. At one point I got a pillow and put it down there and was trying to sit on it. So we were getting up back in our cots, thinking it was going to quiet down, and it didn't. So about 3:20, I looked at my phone because we were hearing a lot of noises and movement and activity again, and the whoops and stuff had picked up. And Carrie had laid down, and she had her eyes closed. I looked at my clock, it was 3:20, and just probably 15 to 20 minutes later, there was I don't remember if it sounded like a twig or something, but it sounded close. And so I looked over at Carrie to see if she'd heard it. Her eyes were closed, and within just a few seconds, I heard gibberish. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. It was not the deep, gruff sound like you would expect. It was, to me, it sounded younger. It sounded like a young, whatever this was, and it was real short. It was just like, and then in a totally different tone, it had an answer, a reply to it. And it was short as well, and it was like, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm looking at Carrie, and she had rolled over at this time, and I'm assuming that she's heard it and leaning on her so she can hear out her good ear. And so after those two, I'm going to call them juveniles, because that's honestly what I think they were because of how they sounded. Of course, I didn't see them, so I don't know. But I think they were juveniles, and I think they're the ones that have been messing with our tent all night. And as soon as that second one said whatever it said, within just a few seconds, it sounded like it was between where we were and where they were, because this third sound that came in was a lot closer to us than they were, was a more, I don't know, I would say it was mature, yeah, maybe the mama, the daddy, I don't know, but that's reminded me of how I would get onto my kids, you know, like, what are y'all doing? Y'all leave these ladies alone and get your butts back home, you know, and that's exactly the tone, you know, that it was come across in, but it was pure gibberish, and we have audio of that. I have the two younger ones, but it's a lot lower, so we're just going to play the Big Daddy, and well, play this in there first. This is unfiltered. This is from my recorder. And then we have it filtered where they remove some of the noise. We'll play both. Now that's just a snippet of it that Mark Newell did for us. He removed a lot of the sound. Let's play the other one. I think it shows the crickets. No, those are the same ones. But that's the third one that we had heard. And so as soon as he, she, whatever got through saying whatever they were saying to these juveniles, you could hear it just as plain as day, and I mean, it was loud to me. You could hear snaps of wood, and then you could hear it splintering, breaking apart, and then a huge tree crashed to the ground. And when it crashed, I mean, you could feel it. You could feel the movement and the sound. It was so close and so loud. And I came up out of my bed as soon as I heard the tree breaking, because you could tell what it was. And I wanted to make sure she was hearing it, because she had rolled over, and I hit the side of her cot, and she rolled over, and she was awake. And I mean, y'all, I still get excited thinking about it. It was so awesome. And I was like, oh my God! I said, you heard all that, right? She nodded, yeah, that she had heard it. And so from that moment, we didn't hear anything. That was like, all right, you get your butts home. This is done. Y'all are through playing. Playtime's over. Go home. Push the tree down, because I'm pretty pissed off. And then that was it. The night it ended. It was quiet. We lay there for, I don't know how long, because it was kind of hard to go back to sleep. We kept thinking something was going to happen again, but it didn't. So we finally went to sleep. And about 6:30 in the morning, I didn't know what time it was, but I started hearing noises again. And I thought, oh my God, seriously? And I opened my eyes and it was daylight. And so I looked out the window and it's Henry. Henry's there. And so I go running out there to Henry. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. And she goes, wait a minute, before you tell me anything. She said, when I got here, it was in the middle of the night, it was still dark. She said, I saw something running from the corner right there. And she pointed towards the corner where I was, where the tent had been hit twice. She said, I saw something running. She goes, I don't know what it was. I could see this part right here. And she had her leg right there. And she said, I could only see this part. She goes, but it was a leg. And it went off behind and along that ridge line. She goes, and that's all I could see. And so I'm telling her everything that had happened. And I'm like, and then there was this gibberish, and then a tree crashed down. And I'm sure I'm just rambling on. I probably sounded like I was talking in gibberish. I was going so fast. And she said, I heard a tree. I heard a tree crash. And so she had gotten there somewhere around that time. But anyway, that was a very eventful night. Later that morning, 10 o'clock, Barbara arrived, and she sets up her tent. And we're there later in the evening. We filled her in on the whole night sequence. I make darn sure to go out there about 7:40, 7:45. I'm putting my audio recorders up. So I go pretty good ways out behind my tent, and I zip tie one up. It was about this high, because that's as high as I can reach without being on a step stool. So I zip tied it in a tree. Said what time it was, what day it was, all that. Went over about 75 feet away, which was straight out from our camp into that wood line. Zip tied another tree. And I'm talking, saying, hey, it's a Saturday night, September 16th, 7:45 p.m. And I hear, from over here, I hear, okay, so Barbara and Henry had been out hanging glow sticks, little necklaces, on the trees. We hang them out there so when it's dark, if something walks in front of it and blacks it out, we know, okay, something this high has darkened that, and it's not a raccoon. And so I thought she was still out in the woods, and I thought she had coughed. And so I hollered, I said something, there's Miss Barbara. And then I go, Barbara, and she doesn't answer. And Barbara? She still doesn't answer. So I turn around, I look at Kat, and I go, Barbara. And she steps out, what? And I realized everybody's in camp. And I said, okay, wait a minute. And I'm talking, and you've got a recording of that. Okay, before you play it though, this one here, don't play it though, the bottom one, the bottom. I go into camp and I'm saying, did anybody cough? Did any of y'all cough? And they're like, no. And I said, okay, I heard what sounded like a cough. So later on we did have activity that night, but it was just sounds. It wasn't anything big like the first night. But upon listening to the audio recorder, when you're listening to it, you can hear like 2 syllables, very breathy. But when you upload it to the computer, you can hear everything much clearer and it's much louder. So when we were listening to it, I got pretty freaked out because it literally sounds like it says, hey, Grumpy. And it splits my name into 2 specific syllables. And go ahead and let you play it, DW, if you will. Give it about 7 seconds into the recording. I think you'll hear it. Did y'all hear that? Okay, we can play it again. We have that's good. There's another, listen to it. Yeah. Go ahead and clip it off. There it is. Did y'all hear it? Are y'all able to hear it? Okay. I think we have a short clip that Mark filtered, and you might be able to hear it a little better. That one. That was it. I think it'll loop. Can y'all hear it okay? Alright, so that was weird. And the gibberish, I do believe there's a language they have, especially now, that I heard them and they could tell that they were talking to each other. But hearing them say, "Hey, Debbie," we know they mimic. I mean, I've heard that. I've heard mimicking. But I was the only one out there in the woods. And they were all back in camp. And for them, whatever it was over by that recorder, because that was on my recorder behind our tent that I just hung up, for them to know, I'm Debbie. That's a lot of intelligence there, a lot more than what people think. That also means that they know Debbie is my name. I mean, does that make sense? So that kind of opens up a whole nother question. And like I've said before, the more I learn about these creatures, the less I know, the more questions I have. I sent recordings to all of the Sisters of the Moon of the gibberish, and Barbara and Sandy were camping along, and they're going to tell you about the events that happened when they played the gibberish in Texas. The all-nighter happened in Oklahoma, southeast Oklahoma.
Right, Debbie had sent us the recording, and we're sitting out in the middle of nowhere. Debbie had gone scouting and picked out a nice spot to go be by herself. It's probably around midnight. It's raining, and I had a little flap on the front of my tent that was Sandy, myself, and my niece, and we're sitting there. And I say, "Hey, you want to hear Bigfoot talking?" And my niece goes, "Yeah." So I get out my phone and I play the recording. It stops and I immediately play it again. Once more, and it's blah, 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 blah. Well, just in the very instant that I stop this recording, behind us we hear 3 booms. Boom, boom, boom. And not only can you hear something coming up behind us from the woods, you feel the energy of whatever is coming up, is coming at us. And I look at my sister like, I don't know what's fixing to happen. And we're sitting there, and just as soon as it gets to the tent, something goes on each side, one on each side. And as they're passing by us, they just shake the trees and just shake. All the water just douches with the water from the trees. And then they start traveling out to the side. And they leave. They left, but they did not want to leave. So we feel like this language, they recognized it. And it was telling them, hey, you need to get out of here. Because we were not bothered. After those 3 crashes and the movements in the woods, no more activity the whole night.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I took it too. We were all sitting there and playing this gibberish for our niece who went with us to we were at the Texas Bigfoot Conference.
She's only gone out like twice.
Yeah. And anyways, we heard the booms, and we thought maybe it was even a tree that had fallen or something, but the next morning when we went to check, there were no trees nowhere to be found that had fallen over. And as soon as she played the gibberish, it's like all this activity, and it was really, really loud, and then there was woods on each side of us. We were camped in the road pretty much, somewhere we weren't supposed to be, and they ran us off the next day, but anyways. They wouldn't let us go back and do it again. But on each side, after the booms, immediately, there was something that flew on each side of those woods. And the woods were too thick, so we couldn't see what it was. But you could hear the heavy footfall. So, yeah, and you could see the movement as they were going through there. And I feel that they understood language. Otherwise, I think they'd have been there watching us all night or something. But whatever that gibberish is that Debbie caught is, get your behinds out of here. Whatever it is.
We nicknamed it Bigfoot Be Gone.
Yeah, and we'll be selling clips of this for anybody that wants some. At your house, or, you know, you're camping, you don't want them around, you just play it. But, went back to Tribulation Bay with Debbie, and she's such a great storyteller, I'm gonna let her tell again what happened when I came back from Georgia this past January, me, her, and Barbara went camping. And same place where all her exciting activity took place, so this is a really good spot, and we're gonna have to go again.
Instead of calling it Charlie's Angels this night, we nicknamed it Mission Impossible.
We did, we still good on time? Okay. We did go back, we've been several times since this happened in September of 2017. We go back occasionally, we always hear calls and stuff like that, but we've never had any major activity like that first night. We have had stuff sound like it's being drugged down the back of our tent, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe it's branches out of a tree, and go out the next day and look behind there, and there's a little branch laying there, but it had hit the tent and gone down the back 7 times, and so I don't think it fell 7 times repeatedly. But when we went back in January of this year, it was the 3 of us. Barbara had her tent on one side, and I had mine directly across from her, and we were probably this far apart from each other, from the wall. And while we were out there, it started raining, and we were all sitting under a tarp in front of her tent, and Sandy and I started hearing moans. Now, the only time before, out of all the times we've been there, that I've ever heard moans was that first night. And this is over about, not quite a year and a half later. And we've been out there several times since then. So in January, we heard moans. And we heard them several times. They weren't changing into animals this night, but they were moans. And so I was like, I wonder if this is the same guy, you know? And a little later on, back behind Barbara's tent, we could hear something from the first night that I had not heard before until that first night. And it sounded like a loud truck motor. That's the only way I can explain it. Like a truck is sitting out there kind of revving up its motor or shifting down. But you could imagine like a big, now when I say truck, I mean like a diesel truck. You know, it was so loud when Carrie and I were hearing it. And so I had told Matt Knapp, who was on the Bigfoot Outlaws podcast host, I had told him earlier about what I had heard. And I said, I don't know how to explain it other than it sounded like a truck motor. But it was coming from the wood line, and I know there wasn't no two wheels sitting out there. And he said that he had heard reports of deep, loud growls, and they had described them as a truck motor shifting down, shifting gears. And I said, well, that makes good sense. That's exactly how it sounded, like it was shifting gears and going down. And he said that they've been reported as being growls. And so when the 3 of us were back out there in January, from behind her tent, we heard this motor sound again. And we heard it 5 different times. And so I'm thinking, okay, now we've got the moans and the motors. Is this going to be a reenactment of the all-nighters that we had? And so I said, you know, I don't think I'm going to sleep in my tent by myself. I said, I'm going to carry all my stuff over and sleep in the middle of their tent. And so I did. I brought everything into their tent. Barbara's tent is a dome, but then it juts out on each side. And so she had her cot on one side and Sandy had hers on the other side. And then I was laying right next to Sandy on the floor. And in front of the door is a dome, and it's an awning. And this is the tent they were using when they played it in Texas. But if you look out the little mesh windows that they have at the top of each side of the door, you can see that that awning comes down and it comes out as a support on each side. And I'm telling you this for a reason. So we're laying there, and we had the heater going because this was January, and it was frigid. It was windy and rainy. It was so cold. And so we had our heater going, so it was some light in the cabin, and they could, you know, see us, I'm sure, if anybody was outside. But then Sandy, or Barbara One, had hung a little strand of probably 6-foot-long Christmas lights that twinkled, and they had hung them up about this high, and it came down, swooped down to about this low on the ground. They'd gone off sometime in the night before we went to bed, which we thought was weird, and we went back there and turned them back on. And they stayed on all night then. But, so you could see those twinkling from where I was laying. My head, all of our heads were facing the door. And we had a light out in front, kind of, you know, a low light. So I roll over onto my back, and as I do, I see a shadow go right down the side of Sandy's side of the tent that juts out, and it came up about yay high. And so I look up at where Sandy's head was just to see if she was awake. Well, she was rolled over facing that wall. And about that same time, she evidently was awake, and she rolled over to look at me to see if I was awake. And then, she, all of our eyes were, Barbara was covered. She had her head covered. And Sandy goes, and I went, well, as soon as it walked by, it hit something. We had a chair that had been turned upside down because it had gotten wet from the rain. And so it was laid over there on the side. And you could hear it like just, it's almost like, you know, when you drag your feet across the dirt and pebbles, the sound it would make, that's what it sounded like. And we don't know if it hit that chair as it was strolling on by our tent or what, but it made that sound. But after it got by there, we decided we could hear it out in front. Well, right by that flap by the door, we had a tub, you know, a big Walmart tub with a lid. And Barbara had been getting snacks, I think, out of it during the day. Paper goods, okay. So we think maybe it thought it was a cooler or something, but we could hear it messing with that now. And so Sandy and I roll over onto our stomachs, and we've got our face right against that tent. We're trying to see if we can see any shadows out there. Couldn't see anything. Now she's on the outside part of that flap, and I'm on the inside part of that flap that's on the outside, you know, of the door. So you could hear like it was trying to drag that tub, and you could hear it being dragged just a little bit at a time, and then the lid, you know how when you lift the lid it'll pop? If you don't take it off, it makes that popping noise. You could hear that, like something was messing with that, and it just kept on and kept on. And I'm looking at Barbara, and she hadn't come out from under her covers, and so that's when I slithered across the floor of the tent, and I come up beside Barbara like a little furry dog. And I'm like, I don't know which end her head's on. About that time, she pulls the covers down, and she was awake, and she was hearing what was going on. And so we're being quiet, and I decided I'm going to stand up and look out of that mesh, because it will look over there where we were hearing it. And so I do. I look out. I don't see a thing at all. I can see that panel that's coming down and that tub that's there that it evidently had been messing with, but I can't see anything on the back side of that flap, that panel. And so, you know, so I move over to the other one, and I'm looking to try to see if anything's on this side, and there wasn't, and I go back to that side, there's nothing. And so Barbara finally, she just hollers, "Get the hell out of here!" And it quiets down. I mean, we could hear something the whole time we were standing there looking, but as soon as she hollers that, it quiets down. And we kind of chuckled, because she scared the crap out of me when she hollered. But, so I sit down, Sandy sits up, and we're sitting there, and we're talking about it. And 5-10 minutes, we lay back down. As soon as we lay back down and get quiet, it starts up again. And I mean, it was messing with that tub. There's no doubt about it. And we were like, dang, it's bold. I mean, we were right there, and it was right there. Barbara, didn't you say you heard it messing with your truck?
Yes, it sounded like something when I had wood under a tarp in the back of my truck, and it would sound like that tarp was being pulled up.
And so I don't know if it was the same one doing that too, but the next day when we got up, I went out and I got on the back side of that flap, squatted down, hiding behind it, because whatever was doing this was hiding. I mean, it's obvious. A raccoon's not going to hide. It's just going to go up and try to, you know, get in that tub and mess with it. I've had them jumping on the top of my tent before. They are not shy at all. And so whatever was doing it was hiding behind that flap. And so I got behind the flap, and I'm reaching, trying to pull it with just my hand, and I could barely pull it, and when I did, my hand slipped, you know, because it was heavy. And so as I was trying to pull it, my hand slips, that lid pops, and it was the exact noise that we were hearing that night. Now, we don't know what it was, but we know what it was doing. And so that kind of eliminates a lot of critters. It's in the woods.
The shadow as it passed by our tent was high enough that we could not see trees that get parted.
Right. What we saw, the shadow of it, we could see about up to, when you say it was there? When we got right there. And so, in order for those lights to create a shadow, if it had been something small, you know, on the ground, the lights would have had to been further down on the ground for it to cast a shadow coming up. It would have had to been behind, you know, a small animal, a possum, raccoon, whatever kind of animals would be making that. So for it to, that lights being up higher, because they were up at least to right here, it had to be above that. And so that eliminates a lot of stuff too. But anyway, that's what we wanted to talk to you about. We think that the sounds that we heard, the gibberish, the hey Debbie's pretty cool, the mimicking. I think it was mimicking, but it does open some questions. But the gibberish to me is what was so really exciting and cool, and hearing them interacting and talking to one another, because that's what it sounded like they were doing.
Understand, we think, in Texas, at least 150, 175 miles away.
Yeah, it leaves you with a lot of questions, you know. Do they have a language? Seems like they might. We may never know, but do you have that video? In the video, there's pictures of the tree breaks, the asterisk. She says she doesn't think the 2 trees are in there that were stuck up in the tree, but this is just some of our shenanigans and findings. But thank you all for listening to us. Enjoy the short video, it's not long. And we'll see y'all the rest of the show.
Bye, y'all. Thanks for hearing me.